The streets of New Providence literally empty last evening as residents obeyed the mandatory curfew now in effect. Good evening, everyone. I'm LaDawn Davis, and this is the Bahamas Tonight, the weekend edition. Thank you so much for tuning in. The Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces were out in full force shortly after 9 last evening, ensuring that no resident violates the curfew, which was imposed to combat the spread of the coronavirus. Here's Altavis Munnings.
Those persons who should not be out, stay home.
And that was the message from Police Commissioner Anthony Ferguson moments before the 9 o'clock curfew came into effect Friday night. And minutes after 9 o'clock on Friday, the police commissioner instructed a contingent of officers here in New Providence to comb the island to enforce the mandatory curfew. Before his team left the police force's East Street headquarters, Police Commissioner Anthony Ferguson briefed the media on this national law enforcement operation.
I don't want anybody trying to sneak and try to ask permission to go someplace. The Prime Minister indicated quite clearly who are those persons that we should give concession to. And I think people ought to understand the care that is being exhibited on behalf of the government to make sure that they are safe.
National Security Minister Marvin Dames was also there to offer words of encouragement to the law enforcement team.
As I was approaching some traffic officers near our Waikiki, at a distance they flagged me down. So they approached me. Were very respectful, and once they recognized who I was, then they were okay. So these officers are. This is what they train for, and I have every confidence that they will carry out their job with the highest degree of professionalism. We're not in the business of wanting to arrest persons and put them behind bars. This is a global crisis of mammoth proportion, and what we want Bahamians to understand is that we have to take these precautions for the safety of every resident of this country.
Commissioner Ferguson disclosed that while stores were closed on Friday, some criminals tried to break into them. Here's the advice to any criminal who commits a crime during the curfew.
I don't think it's a good idea for persons who have ulterior motive to try anything. It's never a good idea for a criminal to try to sneak in. It is unlikely that they would succeed.
For those persons who are hell-bent on challenging the system, that there are consequences for that. And we make no apology for it. We are in very serious times, and how we conduct ourselves will determine how we get out of it and how we rebound.
Let them come, please.
It only took Deputy Police Commissioner Paul Roll several minutes to ensure every police officer and every police vehicle assigned to the mandatory curfew operation left the police force's headquarters in an adequate time. Hundreds of police and defense force officers were on the streets, which was literally a ghost town, but the curfew didn't stop motorists. One of the hot spots for the officers was the intersection of East Street and Robinson Road, which had a heavy police presence. Even a vagrant was allowed to walk the street. Then we drove on Robinson Road to the roundabout near the Town Center Mall, which was also busy with activity.
Let them know that you're leaving work and leaving from work to go home at this time.
We then followed the officers on the east-west highway and identified ourselves at the barricades along the way before arriving at the intersection of Marathon and Robinson Roads, where there was another contingent of police and defense force officers. As we traveled to eastern New Providence on Prince Charles Drive, we saw police vehicles stopping several motorists, questioning them on why they were breaking the curfew. We rode back west to Mackey Street, where the usually busy gas stations were closed and the road mainly empty. Our news team did, though, see several motorists leaving the Paradise Island Bridge heading into the city. There was another contingent of officers at the major intersection of Bay and Marlborough Streets in the downtown corridor. Several foot soldiers patrolled Bay Street, also stopping more motorists. We then drove through the very popular Arawak Key, where you could nearly hear a pin drop. Police are at every corner to ensure that no resident violates the mandatory curfew. I'm Altavis Munnings, ZNS Network News.
Thanks a lot, Alto. While the Royal Bahamas Police and Defense Forces have deployed a large contingent of officers to enforce the mandatory curfew here in New Providence, Police Commissioner Anthony Ferguson said he's confident that the curfew will also be strongly enforced throughout our family islands.
Family islanders, most of them, in any event really, after 10, after 9 o'clock in the evening, they are peaceful. They go, and there are persons who will listen to you. You go. I can assure you that if you go, and some of those islands, like up in Meguano, you would think that there was always curfew, and so oddly people, and I expect the people in New Providence to do the same.
Just hours after that mandatory curfew came into effect on the streets of the capital last evening, local residents are expressing their views. Esso petroleum dealer for the Wolf Road service station, George Cartwright, says while the move is necessary to protect and safeguard the livelihood of residents, he hopes the resident curfew would be a continuous exercise.
It's going to impact the business, but we had to make some adjustments pertaining to staff shifts. The staff are cooperating, customers are cooperating with us. We were hoping that we would have been I guess the petroleum industry would have been open until at least 7 because we feel it would have been more justifiable for the public, but the Prime Minister made his point as to why. We are abiding by that. Hopefully we might be able to get it to go until 7. But the curfew, as far as the curfew is concerned, I'm very happy with it.
Meantime, local entrepreneur Alan Bain is in full support of the mandatory curfew, but he has a few concerns.
I do have my concerns about the curfew. I'd say in one sense it's good for the country, but there's a rebuttal behind that. Persons, that are used to social life, persons that are used to having their freedom, I'd say in acting it, they are not at liberty to do so now.